Chapter 1. The Letter and the Loss. The last day of December had always felt like a quiet punctuation mark in Bill Grant's life. While others were out clinking glasses and shouting countdowns, Bill sat in his modest apartment, legs stretched out on the couch, a half-empty mug of coffee cooling on the table. The muted glow of his television flickered across the room, playing a rerun of some sitcom he'd seen a dozen times. He wasn't lonely, at least that's what he told himself. He liked the peace, the stillness, no drama, no expectations, just him and the hum of his old refrigerator. At 36, Bill had made peace with being the average guy in a world full of peacocks. He wasn't flashy, didn't have a six-pack, and his idea of a wild night was staying up past midnight to finish a woodworking project. Relationships, he'd had a couple, sure, but they fizzled out like cheap fireworks. Most of the women he met seemed more interested in his paycheck than his personality. And honestly, Bill didn't have the energy to play that game. He glanced at the clock, 11:42 p.m., another year almost gone. He thought about making a resolution, something bold like find love or take risks, but the idea felt hollow. He was fine, comfortable, content. Then his phone buzzed. Bill reached for it lazily, expecting a spam text or maybe a Happy New Year from his mom. Instead, the words on the screen made his stomach drop. Dad passed away tonight. Peaceful. Call me when you can. Love you. Bill stared at the message, his breath caught somewhere between his chest and throat. His mom never used short sentences unless she was trying not to cry. He read it again, slower this time, as if the meaning might change. His grandfather, Pappy, was gone. Bill set the phone down and pressed his palms against his eyes. 94 years old. He knew it was coming eventually, but knowing and feeling were two different things. Pappy had been more than a grandfather. He was a compass, a steady hand on Bill's shoulder through every awkward stage of life. Summers at Pappy's house had been the highlight of his childhood. Long days of fishing, tinkering in the workshop, and learning how to make something out of nothing. Pappy taught him patience, taught him that mistakes were just lessons in disguise. Bill swallowed hard and reached for the remote, turning off the TV. The silence felt heavier now, pressing against the walls. He thought about calling his mom, but what would he say? I'm sorry? I love you? Words felt flimsy compared to the weight in his chest. Instead, he sat there, staring at the dark screen, until the clock ticked past midnight and fireworks popped faintly in the distance. A new year had begun, and Pappy wasn't in it. The funeral was 3 days later, a small gathering in the town where Bill had spent those golden summers. The church smelled faintly of old wood and lilies, and the air buzzed with quiet conversations. Bill stood near the front, hands shoved into the pockets of his black suit, listening as people shared stories about Pappy, how he'd fixed their tractors, taught their kids to fish, or slipped them a piece of candy when no one was looking. When it was Bill's turn to speak, he walked to the podium, heart thudding like a drum. He looked out at the faces, his mom, her siblings, neighbors who'd known Pappy for decades, and cleared his throat. Pappy wasn't just my grandfather, Bill began, voice steady despite the lump in his throat. He was my teacher, my friend. He taught me how to build things, sure, but more than that, he taught me how to live. He used to say, don't just exist, Billy. Live. And I guess I'm still figuring out what that means. He paused, eyes stinging, then managed a small smile. But if I can be half the man he was, I'll call that a good life. The words hung in the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. When Bill stepped down, his mom squeezed his hand, her eyes red but warm. 2 weeks later, Bill found himself standing in Pappy's old house, the one with the creaky floors and the smell of sawdust that never quite faded. His mom and her siblings were there too, sorting through boxes of photographs and knickknacks, laughing and crying in equal measure. It was bittersweet, like flipping through a scrapbook of someone's soul. By late afternoon, everyone had taken what mattered most to them. A quilt, a fishing rod, a stack of letters, and the house grew quiet again. Bill wandered through the rooms, touching the worn edges of furniture, remembering 100 different moments. The kitchen where Pappy taught him to make pancakes. The workshop where he learned the difference between a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver. The back porch where they'd sat for hours, watching fireflies dance in the summer dusk. He ended up in the living room, sinking into Pappy's old recliner. It smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and something else, comfort maybe. Bill closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. That's when the doorbell rang. Bill frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. He pushed himself up and opened the door to find an older gentleman standing there, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked sharp enough to cut glass. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his leather briefcase gleamed under the porch light. William Grant? The man asked, voice smooth as polished wood. Bill nodded. Yeah. Can I help you? The man smiled faintly and extended a hand. Arthur Bentley. I was your grandfather's attorney, and his friend. Bill shook his hand, feeling the firm grip. Oh, come in. Arthur stepped inside, his shoes clicking softly against the hardwood. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from years of knowing exactly where you belonged. Bill led him to the dining table, where Arthur set down his briefcase and opened it with a quiet snap. I'll keep this brief, Arthur said. pulling out a manila folder. Your grandfather left you the house, as you know. But there's more. Bill raised an eyebrow. More. Arthur slid the folder across the table. Your grandfather established a trust when you were born. He contributed to it every month for 36 years. The amount is substantial. Bill stared at the folder like it might bite him. Substantial how? Arthur's lips curved into something between a smile and a warning. Enough that you'll never have to worry about money again. But I strongly advise you to keep this private. Wealth has a way of attracting opportunists. Bill blinked, trying to process the words. He'd come here expecting memories, maybe a few old tools, not a fortune. I don't even know what to say. Say nothing, Arthur replied gently. Live your life. Your grandfather trusted you to use this wisely. Bill nodded slowly, fingers brushing the edge of the folder. He felt a strange mix of gratitude and dread. Money didn't change who you were, but it sure changed how people saw you. And Bill hated the idea of his life turning into a series of transactions. Arthur stood, closing his briefcase. If you need guidance, my card is inside. And William, your grandfather was proud of you. Very proud. Bill swallowed hard. Thanks. When the door closed behind Arthur, Bill sat there for a long time, staring at the folder. Outside, the winter wind rattled the windows, whispering through the trees. He thought about Pappy's words, don't just exist. Live. Maybe this was his chance. Maybe it was time to figure out what living really meant. Chapter 2. The House and the Memories. The first week of January brought a brittle cold to the little town, the kind that made the air feel sharp against your skin. Bill drove down the familiar road toward Pappy's house, his old pickup humming like it had something to prove. The tires crunched over patches of frost, and the bare trees stood like sentinels along the roadside. He hadn't been here in years, not since Pappy's health started to decline and the summers became shorter, swallowed by work and obligations. The house appeared at the bend like an old friend waiting patiently. White siding, green shutters, and that wraparound porch where Bill had spent countless evenings watching fireflies. It looked smaller now, though maybe that was just time playing tricks. He parked in the gravel driveway and sat for a moment, staring at the front door. It felt strange, walking into a place that belonged to someone who wasn't here anymore. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and something sweet, maybe the remnants of Pappy's pipe tobacco. The living room was exactly as Bill remembered. The recliner angled toward the TV, the bookshelf crammed with paperbacks and woodworking magazines, the old clock ticking softly on the mantel. For a second, Bill half expected Pappy to shuffle in wearing his flannel shirt and grin like he'd been waiting all day. Bill! His mother's voice floated from the kitchen. He followed the sound and found her standing by the counter, sorting through a box of dishes. Her eyes were tired but warm, framed by lines that told stories of laughter and worry. Two of her siblings, Aunt Linda and Uncle Ray, were there too, knee-deep in boxes of photographs and knickknacks. Hey, Mom, Bill said, leaning in for a hug. She held him tight like she was afraid he might slip away too. Glad you made it, she murmured. We're just trying to figure out what goes where. Bill glanced around at the organized chaos. Looks like you've got your work cut out for you. Linda chuckled softly, holding up a ceramic rooster. Anyone want this? Dad swore it was good luck. Ray snorted. Good luck for what? Scaring burglars. Bill smiled faintly, the banter easing the heaviness in the room. They spent the next hour sorting through memories, old fishing rods, faded photographs, a stack of letters tied with twine. Every item seemed to carry a story, and the stories spilled out like water from a cracked jar. Remember when Dad tried to build that treehouse? Linda said, laughing as she held up a hammer with a worn handle. He got halfway done and decided it was easier to teach us how to climb. Ray grinned. And then Bill fell out of the tree and broke his arm. Bill raised a hand in mock surrender. Hey, in my defense, that branch looked sturdy. The laughter felt good, like sunlight breaking through clouds. For a while, the grief loosened its grip, replaced by warmth and shared history. They cried too, of course, when they found Pappy's old flannel shirt folded neatly in a drawer. Bill held it for a long moment, pressing it to his face, breathing in the faint scent of sawdust and tobacco. It was like holding a piece of time. By late afternoon, the boxes were packed, the rooms a little emptier. His mom hugged him again before leaving, her voice soft against his ear. Take care of this place, Bill. Dad loved it. And he loved you. I will, Bill promised, and he meant it. When the door closed behind them, silence settled over the house like a heavy quilt. Bill wandered through the rooms slowly, touching the worn edges of furniture, the grooves in the wooden banister. Every corner held a memory, a flash of laughter, a whisper of advice. In the kitchen, he saw the spot where Pappy used to stand flipping pancakes, humming some tune from the 40s. In the workshop, the smell of oil and wood lingered, and Bill could almost hear the rhythmic tap of a hammer. He ended up on the back porch, staring out at the yard where he chased fireflies as a boy. The grass was brittle now, the garden bare, but he could still see it. The summer evenings, the glow of lanterns, Pappy's voice telling him stories about the good old days. Bill leaned against the railing, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, and let the memories wash over him. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside, a restless energy, a question he couldn't quite name. His life had been safe, predictable, like a straight road with no turns. But standing here, in the house that built him, Bill wondered if maybe it was time for a detour. He went back inside as dusk settled, the house dim except for the soft glow of the lamp in the living room. He sank into Pappy's recliner, the cushions worn but familiar, and stared at the ceiling. The quiet wasn't empty. It was full of echoes, of lessons and laughter. And somewhere in that quiet, Bill heard Pappy's voice, clear as day. Don't just exist, Billy. Live. Bill closed his eyes, the words settling deep in his chest. He didn't know what living looked like yet, but he knew one thing, it wasn't this. It wasn't sitting in an apartment waiting for life to happen. It was something bigger, something that mattered. And maybe, just maybe, this house was the first step. Chapter 3. The Unexpected Visitor. The winter sun had dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet as Bill settled into Pappy's recliner with a plate of leftover roast beef and mashed potatoes. The house was quiet now, the kind of quiet that felt almost sacred. He'd spent the day clearing out closets, wiping down counters, and rediscovering little treasures. A pocket knife, a stack of old postcards, a jar of screws labeled in Pappy's neat handwriting. Each item felt like a breadcrumb leading back to summers long gone. Bill forked a bite of potatoes, chewing slowly as he stared at the muted glow of the lamp. He wasn't sure what came next. The apartment lease was month to month, his job at the hardware store wasn't exactly a career, and now he had this house. A house that felt more like home than anywhere else. Maybe he'd stay. Maybe he'd fix it up, plant a garden, breathe life back into the place. The doorbell rang. Bill froze, fork halfway to his mouth. He wasn't expecting anyone. His mom had left hours ago, and the neighbors weren't the drop-by kind. Setting the plate aside, he stood and crossed the living room, his boots thudding softly against the hardwood. The bell rang again, polite but insistent. When he opened the door, the man standing there looked like he'd stepped out of a courtroom drama. Tall, silver-haired, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit like it was sewn onto him. His leather briefcase gleamed under the porch light, and his expression was calm, almost reassuring. "William Grant?" the man asked, voice smooth as polished oak. Bill blinked. Yeah, that's me." The man extended a hand. "Arthur Bentley. I was your grandfather's attorney, and his friend." Bill shook his hand, feeling the firm grip. "Oh, I didn't know he had an attorney." Arthur's lips curved into a faint smile. "Your grandfather was a man of foresight. May I come in?" "Sure," Bill said, stepping aside. "Sorry about the mess. Been sorting through things." Arthur entered with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged everywhere. His shoes clicked softly against the floor as Bill led him to the dining table. Arthur set down his briefcase and opened it with a crisp snap, pulling out a manila folder. "I'll keep this brief," Arthur said, sliding the folder toward Bill. "Your grandfather left you the house, as you know. But there's more." Bill frowned, sinking into a chair. "More?" Arthur folded his hands. "Your grandfather established a trust when you were born. He contributed to it every month for 36 years. The amount is substantial." Bill stared at the folder like it might bite him. "Substantial how?" Arthur's tone was calm, but his eyes held a glint of amusement. "Enough that you'll never have to worry about money again." Bill blinked, trying to process the words. "You mean, like, a few $100,000? Arthur's smile deepened. "Try several million." Bill's jaw went slack. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "Several million? Are you serious?" "Quite," Arthur said, sliding a business card across the table. "Your grandfather wanted you to have options, freedom, but he also wanted you to be wise. Which brings me to my next point. Keep this private. Wealth has a way of attracting opportunists." Bill let out a low whistle, staring at the folder. He'd come here expecting memories, maybe a few old tools, not a fortune. I don't even know what to say." "Say nothing," Arthur replied gently. "Live your life. Your grandfather trusted you to use this wisely." Bill nodded slowly, fingers brushing the edge of the folder. Gratitude and dread tangled in his chest. Money didn't change who you were, but it sure changed how people saw you. And Bill hated the idea of his life turning into a series of transactions. Arthur stood, closing his briefcase with a quiet click. "If you need guidance, my card is inside. And William, your grandfather was proud of you. Very proud." Bill swallowed hard. "Thanks, really." Arthur's expression softened. "He always said you had a good heart. Don't lose that." When the door closed behind him, Bill sat there for a long time, staring at the folder. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, whispering through the trees. He thought about Pappy's words, "Don't just exist. Live." Maybe this was his chance. Maybe it was time to figure out what living really meant. Bill opened the folder slowly, scanning the neat rows of numbers that didn't feel real. He wasn't a man who dreamed of yachts or sports cars. He didn't need a mansion or a private jet. He liked simple things, gardening, woodworking, video games on a rainy day. But now, for the first time in his life, he had the power to do something big. something that mattered. And that thought kept him awake long after the house went dark. Chapter 4. A plan takes root. Bill woke up the next morning with sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of Pappy's bedroom, the bedroom that was now his. He lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the old furnace. The folder from Arthur Bentley sat on the nightstand like a silent dare. He'd skimmed through it last night, but the numbers still felt unreal, like Monopoly money printed on crisp legal paper. Several $1 million. Enough to change everything. Enough to ruin everything, too, if he wasn't careful. Bill swung his legs out of bed and padded to the kitchen, where the coffee maker sputtered like it was protesting the cold. He poured himself a mug and leaned against the counter, staring out the window at the frost-tipped yard. The garden beds were bare now, but he could still picture them bursting with tomatoes and peppers come summer. Pappy had loved that garden, said it kept him honest. Bill took a sip of coffee and let the warmth settle in his chest. He wasn't a man who dreamed of yachts or sports cars. He didn't want a mansion with a pool shaped like a guitar. He liked simple things, woodworking, gardening, tinkering with old engines. But now, for the first time in his life, he had the power to do something big. Something that mattered. The question was, what? He spent the morning wandering through the house, picking up tools, flipping through old magazines, trying to shake loose an idea. By noon, he ended up in the workshop, sitting on the edge of Pappy's workbench. The smell of sawdust and oil clung to the air like a memory. Bill ran his fingers over the grooves in the wood, thinking about all the summers he'd spent here, learning how to turn raw lumber into something useful. That's when it hit him. Not the answer, but the question that mattered most. What would Pappy do? Bill closed his eyes, picturing his grandfather's face, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Pappy had always believed in giving back, in teaching people how to stand on their own 2 feet. He didn't just fix things, he taught Bill how to fix them, because knowledge was a gift that lasted longer than any repair. Bill opened his eyes slowly, the idea forming like a seed in rich soil. He thought about the kids in town, the ones who spent summers complaining there was nothing to do. They were right. Other than the diner and that movie theater stuck in 1950, there wasn't much for them. No place to learn, no place to belong. What if there was? Bill grabbed a pencil and a scrap of paper, his hand moving before his brain caught up. A recreation center, not just a gym, but a place where kids could learn real skills. Carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, cooking, things that mattered. Things that could change lives. He pictured a big open space with workstations, a game room for fun, maybe even a kitchen where parents and kids could cook together. A place for family bonding, for community. The more he wrote, the faster the ideas came. A small engine repair station. An auto bay with a hydraulic lift. A corner for video games because hey, kids needed fun too. And why stop there? Invite local professionals to share their experiences. Show kids different career paths. Not everyone went to college. Pappy had said that 100 times. People needed options. Bill sat back, staring at the paper covered in scribbles. His heart thudded like he'd just run a mile. This wasn't just an idea, it was a mission. Something that mattered. Something Pappy would have loved. He spent the rest of the day researching properties on his laptop, the old machine humming like it was trying to keep up with his excitement. Most places were too small, too expensive, or too far from town. Then he saw it. A foreclosed warehouse near downtown, walking distance from the diner. Big enough for everything he'd imagined, and then some. The price was reasonable, considering its condition. It needed work, sure, but Bill wasn't afraid of work. He thrived on it. By evening, Bill had a plan sketched out and a grin he couldn't shake. He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, he felt alive, not just existing but living. Pappy's words echoed in his head like a drumbeat. Don't just exist, Billy. Live. Bill raised his coffee mug in a silent toast to the empty room. Here's to living, Pappy. Chapter 5. The warehouse? Bill had never thought real estate websites could feel like treasure maps, but here he was, hunched over his laptop in Pappy's old kitchen, scrolling through listings like a man possessed. Most properties were either too small, too pricey, or too far from town. He wanted something central, close enough that kids could walk, parents could drop by, and the diner was just around the corner for a post-project milkshake. Then he saw it. An old warehouse on Maple Street, foreclosed. Price tag that didn't make his eyes water. The photos showed a cavernous interior with exposed beams, cracked concrete floors, and enough dust to choke a vacuum cleaner. But Bill didn't see decay, he saw potential. He saw workstations lined up like soldiers, a game room buzzing with laughter, a kitchen humming with family chatter. He saw life. Bill grabbed his jacket and keys, heart thudding like a drum. The January air slapped him awake as he drove into town, the pickup rattling over potholes like it was cheering him on. Maple Street was quiet, lined with brick buildings that had seen better days. The warehouse sat at the end, squat and stubborn, its faded sign barely legible. Bill parked and stepped out, crunching over gravel. The building loomed like a sleeping giant, windows clouded with grime, metal doors streaked with rust. Most people would have turned around. Bill grinned. Perfect, he muttered. He circled the building, peering through cracked panes. Inside, Sunlight slanted through high windows, catching motes of dust that danced like tiny ghosts. The space was huge, bigger than he'd imagined. Sure, it needed work. A lot of work. But Bill wasn't afraid of that. Work was where he felt alive. He called the number on the listing, half expecting a voicemail. Instead, a brisk voice answered. Maple Realty. This is Denise. Hi, Denise. I'm looking at the warehouse on Maple Street. Is it still available? It is, she said, her tone brightening. Would you like to schedule a viewing? Bill glanced at the building, then laughed. I'm already here. 2 days later, Bill sat across from Denise in a cramped office that smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. The paperwork spread between them looked like a foreign language, but Bill nodded along, signing where she pointed. The price was fair, and thanks to Pappy's trust fund, he didn't need a loan. That part felt surreal, writing a check that could have bought his old apartment 10 times over. When Denise handed him the keys, Bill felt a rush of something electric. Possibility, freedom, maybe even a little terror. He pocketed the keys and drove straight to the warehouse, unlocking the door with a satisfying click. The hinges groaned as he pushed it open, and cold air spilled out like a warning. Bill stepped inside, boots echoing on concrete. The space swallowed him whole, high ceilings, steel beams, shadows stretching like fingers. He turned slowly, imagining walls where there were none, laughter where there was silence. It was overwhelming, sure, but in the best way. He spent the next hour pacing the floor, sketching ideas in his notebook. Carpentry stations along the left wall. Plumbing and electrical setups near the back. A game room up front, bright and welcoming. And in the far corner, a kitchen big enough for cooking classes. He even marked a spot for an auto bay, complete with a hydraulic lift. The possibilities sprawled like a blueprint in his mind. By the time he locked up, the sun was sinking, and Bill's stomach growled like an angry dog. He swung by the diner for a burger, his notebook open beside the ketchup bottle. The waitress, a sharp-eyed woman named Marlene, eyed his scribbles. Building a spaceship? She asked, pouring his coffee. Bill grinned. Something like that. The renovations started the following week. Bill hired local tradesmen, guys who knew their way around a hammer and didn't mind a little dust. Word spread fast in a town this size. By day 3, half the diner was buzzing about Grant's big project. Some folks were skeptical, others curious, but most were excited. It wasn't every day someone tried to breathe life into Maple Street. Bill worked alongside the crew, hauling lumber, sweeping floors, learning tricks he didn't know. He loved it. The sweat, the noise, the smell of fresh-cut wood. Felt like building more than walls. Felt like building a future. One afternoon, as he wrestled with a stubborn bolt, one of the guys, a burly plumber named Hank, wiped his brow and said, "So what's this place gonna be, anyway?" Heard everything from a bowling alley to a secret lab. Bill laughed, tightening the bolt. Not a lab. It's a rec center. For kids, families. A place to learn stuff, carpentry, cooking, plumbing, even video games. Hank raised an eyebrow. Video games and plumbing? That's a combo. Life skills and fun, Bill said, shrugging. Not everyone goes to college. People need options. Hank grinned. You know, that's not half bad. By the end of the week, the skeleton of Bill's dream was taking shape. Walls framed, wiring snaking through beams, the echo of hammers ringing like music. Every nail felt like a promise. And for the first time in years, Bill didn't just feel alive, he felt unstoppable. Chapter 6. Opening day. The morning of the grand opening dawned crisp and bright, the kind of winter day that made the air feel like glass. Bill stood outside the warehouse. No, the recreation center, watching sunlight glint off the freshly painted sign, the Grant Center. Below the name, in smaller letters, it read, "In memory of Pappy." Bill's throat tightened every time he looked at it. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of sawdust, paint fumes, and late nights fueled by diner coffee. But now, the place gleamed like a promise. The game room up front buzzed with consoles and beanbags. The kitchen smelled faintly of new wood and stainless steel, and the workstations stood ready. Rows of carpentry benches, plumbing rigs, electrical panels, even an auto bay with a hydraulic lift that Hank had installed himself. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was alive. And so was the street outside. Bill peeked through the glass doors at the crowd gathering on the sidewalk. Parents bundled in coats, kids bouncing on their toes, faces bright with curiosity. The hum of conversation floated through the cold air, mingled with laughter and the occasional squeal of excitement. Bill's stomach did a nervous flip. He wasn't a speech guy. He wasn't a spotlight guy. But today he had to be. "Looks like half the town showed up," Hank muttered, stepping up beside him. His flannel shirt was dusted with sawdust, like he'd worn it as a badge of honor. Bill exhaled slowly. "Yeah. No pressure, right?" Hank grinned. "You'll do fine. Just talk like you're talking to Pappy." Bill nodded, gripping the edge of the door like it might steady him. He thought about Pappy's voice, calm and steady, telling him to live. That helped. The mayor arrived just as Bill stepped outside. A tall woman in a tailored coat, her silver hair swept into a neat bun. Margaret Winton had been mayor for as long as Bill could remember, and she carried herself like someone who knew every brick in this town personally. "Mr. Grant," she said warmly, extending a gloved hand. "This is quite the undertaking." Bill shook her hand, trying not to look like a man who'd rather be hiding behind a toolbox. "Thank you, Mayor. Just trying to give back." "And you've done more than that," she said, her eyes sweeping over the building. "This is hope, Mr. Grant. And we could use a little of that." Bill swallowed hard. "I appreciate that." The crowd hushed as Margaret stepped forward, her voice carrying like a bell. "Good morning, everyone. Today we celebrate not just a building, but a vision. A place where families can learn, grow, and connect. Thanks to Mr. Grant's generosity and determination, Maple Street has a new heartbeat." Applause rippled through the crowd, and Bill felt his ears burn. Margaret turned to him with a smile. "Bill, would you like to say a few words?" Bill's stomach did another flip, but he stepped up, clearing his throat. Hi." A few chuckles broke the tension, and Bill smiled faintly. "I'm not much for speeches, so I'll keep this short. This center is here because of one man, my grandfather. Pappy taught me that life isn't about what you have, it's about what you give. He believed in teaching, in sharing, in living. So this place, it's for all of you, for families, for kids who want to learn something new. And it's free. The only rule is, parents, you've got to join in. No dropping off and running. This is about bonding, about making memories." The cheer that followed was loud enough to rattle the windows. Bill felt something warm bloom in his chest. Pride, maybe, or gratitude. He stepped back as Margaret raised her hands for quiet. "Let's make this official," she said, snipping the ribbon with a flourish. "Welcome to the Grant Center." The doors swung open, and the crowd surged inside like a tide. Bill stood back, watching faces light up as kids darted toward the game room. Parents wandered through the workstations, and laughter filled the air. It was chaos, sure, but the good kind, the kind that smelled like possibility. Bill was still soaking it in when a voice cut through the noise. "Excuse me, are you Bill?" He turned and saw her, a woman about his age, maybe a little younger, with chestnut hair pulled into a loose bun and eyes the color of strong coffee. She wore a simple coat, a scarf looped around her neck, and beside her stood a girl 9, maybe 10, with a grin that could power a small city. "I'm Crissy Allen," the woman said, offering a hand. "This is my daughter, Sophie." Bill shook her hand, his smile easy. "Nice to meet you. First time here?" "Yep," Crissy said, her voice warm but edged with curiosity. "Sophie wants to learn how to do man things." She made air quotes and Sophie nodded solemnly. Bill raised an eyebrow, amused. "Man things? Plumbing, carpentry, stuff like that," Sophie said, chin lifted like a tiny warrior. Bill chuckled. "That's ambitious." Crissy shrugged, her lips quirking. "I told her it's better to know how to do something you'll never need than not know something you do." Bill blinked, then grinned. "Can't argue with that logic." Sophie beamed, and Crissy's smile deepened, just enough to make Bill's stomach do something weird. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew one thing. This day had just gotten a lot more interesting. Chapter 7, Crissy Allen. Bill had always been good at reading a room, or at least reading a toolbox, but reading people, that was trickier. And Crissy Allen was proving to be the kind of puzzle he didn't mind spending time on. The rec center was buzzing like a beehive. Kids darted between stations, parents hovered near workbenches, and the smell of fresh paint mingled with the faint aroma of coffee from the corner table where Marlene from the diner had set up a thermos. Bill moved through the crowd like a man checking his own heartbeat, making sure everything was running smoothly. But his eyes kept drifting back to Crissy and her daughter. Sophie was already elbow-deep in a carpentry kit, hammering nails with the kind of determination that made Bill grin. Crissy stood nearby, her coat draped over a chair, scarf loosened, watching her daughter with a mix of pride and amusement. Every so often, she'd glance around the room, taking it all in, the laughter, the chatter, the hum of possibility. Bill approached with a smile that felt too easy. "Looks like Sophie's a natural." Crissy turned, her eyes warm and sharp all at once. "She's stubborn. Gets it from me." Bill chuckled. "Stubborn's good. Makes for solid joints." Crissy tilted her head, lips quirking. "Is that a woodworking joke?" "Guilty," Bill said, leaning against the edge of the workbench. "So, what about you? Planning to pick up a hammer?" Crissy laughed softly, the sound like a spark in the cold air. "Me? I'm more of a finesse person. Hammers aren't really my style." Bill raised an eyebrow. "Finesse, huh? What does that look like?" Her smile shifted, smaller, softer, like she was letting him peek behind a curtain. "Dancing," she said simply. "Ballroom, mostly." Bill blinked. "Ballroom dancing? Like waltz and tango, and foxtrot, rumba, cha-cha," Crissy said, ticking them off on her fingers. "I've loved it since I was a kid. There's something about the elegance, the rhythm, the way it feels like stepping into another time." Bill tried to picture it. Crissy in a flowing gown, gliding across a polished floor under soft lights. The image hit him harder than he expected. "That's wow. I didn't see that coming." "Most people don't," she said with a shrug. It's not exactly a small-town hobby. Bill grinned. Guess that makes it even cooler. Crissy's eyes flicked to Sophie, who was now hammering like she was auditioning for a demolition crew. I used to dream about teaching classes, she said quietly, sharing it with people. But life, you know how it goes. Bill nodded, though he didn't know, not really. He'd never had kids, never juggled dreams with diapers and bills. But he could hear the weight in her voice, the way passion had been folded and tucked away like a dress in the back of a closet. You ever think about doing it now? He asked. Crissy laughed, shaking her head. Where? The diner's back room? I don't think Marlene would appreciate a foxtrot between the pie cases. Bill chuckled, but the idea lodged in his brain like a nail in fresh wood. The warehouse, the rec center, had space. Big, open space. He hadn't planned anything for the far corner yet. What if? He pushed the thought aside for now, focusing on Crissy as she brushed a strand of hair from her face. There was something about her. Something steady and bright, like a lantern in a storm. Bill felt a tug in his chest, the kind he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. So, he said, trying to sound casual, if you had the chance, would you teach? Crissy's eyes met his, dark and clear. If I had the chance, she said softly, I'd dance until my feet gave out. Bill swallowed, his mind already racing ahead. Wooden floors, soft lights, music drifting through the air. He didn't know how yet, but he knew one thing: he was going to give her that chance. Chapter 8. The dance floor idea. The rec center had been open for 2 weeks, and Bill was still riding the high of seeing kids hammering nails like pros and parents laughing over burnt pancakes in the kitchen station. Every day brought something new. A kid learning to solder, a dad teaching his son how to change a tire, a mom discovering she could swing a hammer without breaking a nail. It was chaos, sure, but the good kind. The kind that smelled like sawdust and hope. But in the back of Bill's mind, one thought kept circling like a hawk: Crissy Allen. He'd seen her a few times since opening day, always with Sophie, always smiling that easy smile that made Bill forget what he was supposed to be doing. They talked in snatches about Sophie's progress, about the weather, about how Hank had nearly electrocuted himself installing the wiring for the game room. But every time Bill wanted to ask her more. About dancing. About dreams. And today he was going to. The warehouse's far corner was still empty. A big, open space with polished concrete floors and sunlight streaming through high windows. Bill stood there, hands on his hips, imagining what it could be. He pictured wooden floors gleaming under soft lights, music drifting through the air, couples moving in rhythm like something out of an old movie. It wasn't just a picture. It was a plan forming in his head like a blueprint. He found Crissy near the kitchen station, laughing as Sophie tried to flip a pancake without sending it airborne. Bill waited until the laughter died down, then cleared his throat. Got a minute? He asked. Crissy turned, eyebrows lifting. Sure. What's up? Bill gestured toward the empty corner. Come with me. She followed, curiosity sparking in her eyes. When they reached the space, Bill spread his arms like a magician revealing a trick. What do you see? Crissy glanced around, lips quirking. Concrete, dust, a suspicious stain that looks like it's judging me. Bill chuckled. Okay, fair. But imagine this: wooden floors, soft lights, music playing. A dance floor. Crissy blinked, then laughed. A warm, surprised sound. A dance floor? Here. Why not? Bill said, grinning. We've got space. And you've got the passion. Her smile faltered, just a little. Bill, that's sweet. But ballroom dancing isn't exactly a big draw in a town where Friday night means bowling and burgers. Maybe, Bill said, stepping closer, his voice steady. But people need more than bowling. They need something elegant, something fun. And you could teach them. Crissy stared at him, her eyes searching his face like she was trying to figure out if he was serious. You want me to teach ballroom dancing? In a rec center? Not just want, Bill said. I think it'd be amazing. For the adults, for the couples who need a night out, for anyone who wants to try something new. This place is about learning and connecting. Dancing fits. Crissy's laugh softened into something thoughtful. She looked at the empty space again, and Bill saw it. The flicker of longing in her eyes, the dream she'd tucked away years ago. It's tempting, she admitted. But there's one condition. Bill raised an eyebrow. Condition? You, she said, pointing at him. If I do this, you're my dance partner. Bill blinked. Me? I've got 2 left feet. Then you'll learn, Crissy said, her smile turning mischievous. No excuses. If I'm teaching, you're dancing. Bill opened his mouth, then closed it. He thought about saying no, about how he'd probably trip over his own boots and take her down with him. But then he saw the spark in her eyes, the way her smile curved like a challenge. And suddenly, the idea didn't seem terrifying. Seemed exciting. Deal, he said, his grin slow and certain. But fair warning, I'm gonna need a lot of practice. Crissy laughed, the sound bright and full of promise. Good thing I'm patient. Bill looked at the empty space again, and for the first time he didn't just see a dance floor. He saw a possibility. He saw something that felt like living. Chapter 9. Lessons in Grace. Bill had faced plenty of challenges in his life. fixing a leaky faucet without flooding the kitchen, assembling furniture without swearing loud enough for the neighbors to hear. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the battlefield known as ballroom dancing. The new dance floor gleamed under soft lights, a polished expanse of maple that smelled faintly of varnish and possibility. Bill stood at the edge, tugging at the collar of his button-down shirt like it was trying to strangle him. He'd even swapped his usual boots for a pair of borrowed dress shoes that felt like medieval torture devices. Crissy was already on the floor, moving with the kind of grace that made Bill wonder if gravity had a personal vendetta against him. She wore a simple navy dress that skimmed her knees, her hair swept up in a loose bun that looked effortless and perfect. When she smiled at him, Bill felt his stomach do a somersault. "Ready?" she asked, her voice warm and teasing. Bill glanced at his feet, then back at her. "Define ready." Crissy laughed, the sound like music itself. "Don't worry, we'll start simple. Basic waltz. 3 steps. Forward. Side. Together." "Sounds easy enough," Bill said, though his gut told him otherwise. She stepped closer, holding out her hands. "Take my right hand in your left. Your right hand goes on my back." Lightly. Bill hesitated, then placed his hand where she indicated. Her back was warm under the fabric, and suddenly his brain short-circuited. He cleared his throat, trying to focus on the mechanics instead of the fact that he was touching a woman who smelled like vanilla and something he couldn't name but wanted to. "Okay," Crissy said, her tone patient. "Left foot forward, right foot to the side. Bring your left foot in." "Got it." Bill nodded like a man about to jump off a cliff. "Got it. Good. Now music." She tapped her phone, and a soft waltz filled the air, strings sweeping like silk, rhythm steady and sure. Bill swallowed hard. He could do this. 3 steps. Forward. Side. Together. He moved his left foot forward, and promptly stepped on Crissy's shoe. "Sorry," Bill blurted, jerking back like he'd set off a landmine. Crissy laughed, shaking her head. "Relax. It's just a shoe." Bill grimaced. "You might want steel-toed boots. Or bubble wrap," she teased. "Try again." They started over. Forward. Side. Together. Bill managed the first 2 steps, then forgot which foot was supposed to move and ended up doing something that looked like a drunken hopscotch. Crissy bit her lip, trying not to laugh. "Creative. Not correct, but creative." Bill groaned. "I told you, I've got 2 left feet. Then we'll make them work," she said, her smile softening. "You're doing fine." "Fine." Bill snorted. "I'm a public safety hazard." "Only if you start spinning," Crissy said, eyes twinkling. "Which we're not doing yet." They tried again, and again. Each time, Bill improved by microscopic degrees, but Crissy never lost her patience. She guided him gently, her voice calm, her touch steady. And somewhere between the missteps and the laughter, Bill stopped worrying about looking like an idiot. He started listening to the music, to her voice, to the rhythm that pulsed like a heartbeat. By the 5th attempt, they were moving in something that vaguely resembled a waltz. Bill's hand rested on her back, her fingers curled lightly in his, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of strings and the warmth of her smile. "See," Crissy murmured. "You're getting it." Bill met her gaze, his breath catching. "Only because you're carrying me." "Not true," she said softly. "You're doing this." Bill wanted to say something. Something about how she made it easy, how she made everything feel lighter. But before he could, Sophie's voice rang out from the doorway. "Mom, you're dancing with Mr. Bill." Bill jerked back like he'd been caught stealing cookies. Crissy laughed, covering her mouth as Sophie barreled in, her grin wide enough to split her face. "Are you gonna teach him the spinny thing?" Sophie asked, bouncing on her toes. "Not yet," Crissy said, still laughing. "We're working on walking without casualties." Bill groaned. "Thanks for the vote of confidence, kid." Sophie giggled and darted off, leaving Bill and Crissy standing in the middle of the floor, the music still playing softly. Crissy looked at him, her eyes warm and bright. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. Bill hesitated, then smiled, a slow, certain smile that felt like the start of something. "Wouldn't miss it." Chapter 10. Sparks fly. The Grant Center had been humming for weeks, but tonight was different. Tonight was the first big community event, a showcase of everything the center offered. Bill had spent the day running on caffeine and adrenaline, making sure every station gleamed like a promise. The game room was packed with kids battling it out on consoles. The kitchen smelled like heaven thanks to a chili cook-off, and the carpentry corner looked like a lumberjack convention. By 6 o'clock, the place was bursting at the seams. Parents chatted over coffee, kids darted between stations, and laughter rolled through the air like music. Bill stood near the entrance, greeting people with a smile that felt equal parts pride and exhaustion. He'd never seen the town this alive, and for the first time in years, he felt like he belonged to something bigger than himself. "Bill!" Hank's voice boomed from across the room. The burly plumber waved a hand like he was signaling a rescue helicopter. "You gotta see this." Bill wove through the crowd, dodging a kid carrying a tray of cookies like a live grenade. Hank was standing near the dance floor, the new addition that had taken shape over the past week. The maple gleamed under soft lights, and a speaker in the corner played a gentle waltz. Couples were already moving across the floor, some graceful, others looking like they were wrestling invisible bears. And then Bill saw her. Crissy stood at the edge of the floor, her navy dress flowing as she laughed with Sophie. Her hair was down tonight, curling softly around her shoulders, and Bill felt his breath hitch like someone had yanked the emergency brake on his lungs. "Go on," Hank muttered, elbowing him. "You built the floor. Time to use it." Bill shot him a look. "You trying to kill me?" "Just your pride," Hank said with a grin. "Now move." Before Bill could protest, Crissy spotted him. Her smile lit up like a marquee sign. "Bill, perfect timing." "Timing for what?" he asked, though he already knew. "For this," she said, holding out her hand. "Dance with me." Bill stared at her hand like it was a live wire. "Crissy, there are people watching." "Exactly," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Show them what you've learned." Bill groaned softly, but his feet moved before his brain could veto the idea. He took her hand, warm and steady, and let her lead him onto the floor. The music swelled, strings sweeping like silk, and Bill placed his other hand on her back, just like she'd taught him. His heart thudded like a drumline. "Relax," Crissy murmured, her voice low enough to drown out the crowd. "Just like practice." "Practice didn't involve an audience," Bill muttered. "Pretend they're not here," she said, smiling. "It's just us." Bill tried. He really did. He focused on the rhythm, on her voice, on the way her eyes held his like they were tethered. Forward, side, together. Forward, side, together. And somehow, miraculously, they moved in sync. Not perfect, but close enough that Bill felt something shift inside him. Something warm and electric. "You're doing great," Crissy whispered. Bill met her gaze, his breath catching. "Only because you're carrying me." Her smile softened. "Not true." The music swelled, and Bill felt the world narrow to the space between them. The warmth of her hand, the curve of her smile, the way her laugh lingered like sunlight. He wanted to say something, wanted to close the distance, wanted, "Mom! Mr. Bill, look at my pancake tower." Sophie's voice sliced through the moment like a chainsaw through silk. Bill jerked back, nearly tripping over his own feet, as Sophie barreled onto the floor, holding a plate stacked with pancakes that wobbled like a Jenga tower. "Impressive," Bill said, his voice strangled as he tried to catch his breath, and his dignity. Crissy laughed, covering her mouth. "Go show Hank before gravity wins." Sophie darted off, leaving Bill and Crissy standing in the middle of the floor, the music still playing softly. Crissy looked at him, her eyes warm and amused. "Guess the universe isn't ready for us yet," she teased. Bill grinned, slow and certain. "Maybe it's just making us wait." Crissy's smile lingered, and for a moment, Bill felt like the room had gone quiet, even with laughter and music swirling around them. Something was happening here, something worth waiting for. Chapter 11. Doubts and Confessions. The Grant Center was quiet for the first time in weeks. The big event had ended hours ago, leaving behind the faint scent of chili and sawdust, and Bill was still riding the afterglow, though it was tangled with something heavier. He sat alone on the dance floor, legs stretched out, staring at the polished wood that had seen laughter, music, and one almost kiss that still burned in his mind. He should have kissed her. The thought hit him like a hammer every time he replayed the moment. The way Crissy's eyes had softened, the way her smile lingered like an invitation. But then Sophie had burst in with her pancake tower, and the spell shattered like glass. Bill chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. Timing had never been his strong suit. But tonight, timing wasn't the only thing gnawing at him. Arthur Bentley's words echoed in his head. "Keep it private. Wealth attracts opportunists." Bill had taken that advice to heart, but now it felt like a weight pressing on his chest. Every time he looked at Crissy, he wondered, what happens when she finds out? Will she see him or just the dollar signs? He hated that thought. Hated that money could twist something good into something ugly. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't about status. He'd built this center because it mattered, because Pappy believed in giving back. But still, secrets had a way of poisoning things. And Bill didn't want that. Not with Crissy. The sound of footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. He looked up to see her standing in the doorway, framed by the soft glow of the hall light. Her coat was draped over her arm, her hair loose around her shoulders, and her smile, small, tired, but real, made Bill's heart stumble. "Hey," she said softly. "You're still here." Bill managed to smile. "Yeah, just thinking." Crissy walked over, her heels clicking lightly on the wood. She sank down beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her shoulder. For a moment, they sat in silence, listening to the hum of the heater and the distant creak of settling beams. "Big night," she said finally. "You should be proud." Bill shrugged, staring at the floor. "It's not just me. Everyone pitched in." "Still," Crissy said, her voice gentle, "you made this happen. For the town. For the kids. That's rare." Bill swallowed hard, the compliment landing like a weight he didn't deserve. "I just wanted to do something that mattered." "You did," she said simply. Then her tone shifted, softer, almost hesitant. Bill, can I ask you something? He turned, meeting her gaze. Anything. Crissy's eyes searched his face, dark and steady. Why? Why go through all this trouble? Most people would have just lived their lives. Quiet. Simple. Bill hesitated, the truth clawing at his throat. He could lie. Say he'd saved up, say he'd scraped by. But the thought made his stomach twist. She deserved honesty. If this was going to be anything real, it had to start there. But before he could speak, Crissy looked away, her fingers twisting in her scarf. Sorry. That sounded nosy. No, Bill said quickly. It's fair. He drew a breath, steadying himself. The truth is, when Pappy passed, he left me more than this house. He left me a trust. Money. A lot of it. Crissy's head snapped up, her eyes wide. Money? Bill nodded, his voice low. Enough that I'll never have to worry again. Enough to make people look at me differently. Which is why I kept it quiet. Crissy stared at him, silent for a long moment. Bill braced himself for the shift, for the flicker of calculation, the polite smile that hid a new agenda. But it didn't come. Instead, she laughed softly, a sound that held no greed, no judgment, just surprise. Well, she said, her lips curving. That explains the dance floor. Bill blinked. That's it? No questions? No weirdness? Crissy shook her head, her smile warm and steady. Bill, money doesn't change who you are. And who you are, the guy who built this place, who cares about kids and families, that's what matters. Not the size of your bank account. Bill felt something loosen inside him, like a knot unraveling. He exhaled slowly, his chest lighter than it had been in weeks. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. Crissy's hand brushed his light, tentative, but enough to send a spark racing up his arm. You're a good man, Bill. Don't let fear tell you otherwise. Bill turned his hand, letting his fingers curl around hers. The warmth of her touch was steady, grounding, and for a moment, the world felt simple again. No secrets, no doubts, just two people sitting on a dance floor, holding on to something that felt like the start of everything. Chapter 12. The big reveal. The next few days passed in a blur of sawdust, laughter, and music drifting from the dance floor. Bill and Crissy fell into an easy rhythm. Morning check-ins about the center, afternoons spent teaching kids how to wield a hammer without losing a thumb, and evenings where Bill traded his boots for dress shoes and tried not to step on Crissy's toes. He was getting better, slowly, but every lesson left him grinning like a fool and wondering how he'd gone so long without this kind of joy. But tonight wasn't about waltzes or workstations. Tonight was about honesty. Bill had told Crissy about the trust fund in the quiet glow of the dance floor, but the conversation had been brief, too brief for the weight it carried. He'd expected questions, maybe even distance, but instead, she'd smiled and said the words that had been echoing in his head ever since. Money doesn't change who you are. It should have been enough. It almost was. But Bill wanted more than reassurance. He wanted her to understand everything, the why, the how, the heart behind it all. So when the last family left and the center settled into silence, Bill found Crissy in the kitchen, wiping down counters with Sophie humming softly nearby. The girl was stacking measuring cups like a miniature architect, oblivious to the storm brewing in Bill's chest. Crissy, Bill said, his voice low. Can we talk? Alone? Crissy glanced at Sophie, then nodded. Sophie, sweetheart, go grab your book from the office. We'll be right here. Sophie skipped off and Crissy turned to Bill, her expression calm but curious. What's on your mind? Bill drew a breath, steadying himself. The other night, when I told you about the money, I didn't tell you everything. Crissy leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely. Okay. Bill ran a hand through his hair, searching for words that didn't sound like a confession in a courtroom. Pappy didn't just leave me money. He left me a letter. Said he was proud of me. Said he wanted me to live, not just exist. That's why I built this place. Not because I had cash burning a hole in my pocket, but because this felt like living, like doing something that matters. Crissy's eyes softened, her posture easing. Bill, he broke off, his voice rough. I needed you to know that, because if this, he gestured between them, the space charged with something fragile and bright. If this ever becomes more than dance lessons and pancake towers, I don't want you thinking it's about money. It's not. It's about you. About us. Silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the heater and Bill's pounding heartbeat. Crissy didn't speak right away. She stepped closer, her gaze steady, her voice quiet but sure. Bill, I never thought it was about money, she said. Not for a second. You could have told me you were broke and living on diner coffee, and I'd still be standing here. Because what you've built, the center, the community, that's who you are. And that's why she hesitated, then smiled, soft and certain. That's why I trust you. Bill felt something crack open inside him. A flood of relief, gratitude, and something deeper that he didn't dare name yet. He laughed softly, shaking his head. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. Crissy's hand found his, warm and steady. Maybe I do. For a moment, they stood there, fingers entwined, the world narrowing to the quiet space between them. Bill wanted to kiss her, God, he wanted to. But Sophie's voice rang out from the hallway like a tiny alarm clock. Mom, Mr. Bill, I found my book. Crissy laughed, her forehead resting briefly against Bill's shoulder before she pulled away. Saved by the kid again. Bill grinned, his voice low. One of these days, Sophie's timing is going to work in my favor. Crissy's smile lingered, her eyes bright with something that felt like promise. Maybe sooner than you think? Chapter 13. Dancing into tomorrow, the Grant Center shimmered under strings of white lights, their glow soft against the polished maple floor. The community dance night had drawn a crowd bigger than Bill ever imagined. Couples in their Sunday best, kids twirling in sneakers, laughter spilling like music through the air. The scent of fresh-baked pies from Marlene's table mingled with the faint tang of varnish, and the hum of conversation rose and fell like waves. Bill stood near the entrance, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. He wasn't a tie guy, never had been, but tonight felt different. Tonight wasn't about nails and lumber or even video games and chili cook-offs. Tonight was about something bigger, something that had been building quietly between waltz steps and shared smiles. Crissy. He spotted her across the room, and for a moment, the noise faded to a low hum. She wore a deep green dress that skimmed her knees, her hair swept up with a few loose curls framing her face. She was laughing at something Sophie said, her head tilted, her eyes bright, and Bill felt that familiar somersault in his chest. He drew a breath, steadying himself. Tonight, he wasn't going to let timing trip him up. Tonight, he was going to live. The music shifted. A slow waltz, strings sweeping like silk, and Crissy turned, her gaze finding his across the room. Her smile was soft, knowing, like she'd been waiting for this moment too. Bill crossed the floor, weaving through clusters of dancers, his pulse thudding like a drumline. Dance with me? He asked, his voice low, steady. Crissy's smile deepened. Thought you'd never ask. He took her hand. Warm? Sure. And led her onto the floor. The lights glowed above them, the music curling through the air like a promise. Bill placed his hand on her back, just like she taught him, and for once his feet didn't feel like bricks. They moved together, slow, steady, in rhythm, and the world narrowed to the space between them. You've gotten better, Crissy murmured, her voice teasing but tender. Bill grinned. Had a good teacher. Her laugh was soft, and Bill felt it like sunlight breaking through clouds. They turned, gliding past couples and clusters of kids, and for a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the room. The music swelled, and Bill's breath caught as Crissy looked up at him, her eyes dark and bright all at once. Crissy, he said, his voice rough with something he couldn't hold back. She didn't let him finish. Her smile curved, her fingers tightening in his, and then she was leaning in, closing the space that had felt like a canyon for weeks. Bill met her halfway, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was soft, certain, and everything he'd been waiting for. The room didn't disappear. He could still hear laughter, still feel the hum of music, but it didn't matter. Because in that moment, nothing mattered except her. When they broke apart, Crissy's forehead rested against his, her breath warm against his cheek. Took you long enough, she whispered. Bill laughed, low and shaky, his heart pounding like a hammer. Worth the wait. Later, when the lights dimmed and the last song faded, Bill stood on the porch of the center, the winter air crisp against his skin. Crissy was beside him, her hand tucked into his, and Sophie was inside helping Hank polish off the leftover pie. Bill looked out at the quiet street, at the glow of the sign above the door, the Grant Center in memory of Pappy, and felt something settle deep in his chest. He thought about Pappy's words, written in that letter now tucked safely in his desk. Don't just exist, Billy. Live. For years, Bill had thought living meant surviving, paying bills, keeping the peace, staying comfortable. But now he knew better. Living was building something that mattered. Living was laughter echoing through a warehouse that used to be empty. Living was a waltz under soft lights and a kiss that felt like the start of forever. Bill squeezed Crissy's hand, his smile slow and certain. You know, he said softly, I think Pappy would have liked tonight. Crissy leaned against him, her voice warm. I think he'd be proud. Bill looked up at the stars, their cold light sharp against the dark, and felt a quiet joy bloom inside him. A joy that wasn't loud or flashy, but steady and true. He wasn't just existing anymore. He was living.